Okay, welcome to another episode of Hidden City Ironworks. Looks like the shop foreman and her assistant got here early doing paperwork. So the lights are on, bills are paid, and we're about to do some metal work. Okay, what we're going to do is, if you remember, the holes in the back underneath the seat, they are big, and I've covered them with KBS coat. And this stuff, why would you paint before you weld? Well, there's a lot of stuff in here, and I am not going to like hand form. I'm going to do an overlay, and I'm going to smear it and sandwich it with seam sealer. I know that's not the best way to do it, but that's how I'm going to do it, because there are no patch panels for this car. So I think the best thing to do is get a panel that will overlay it, but then put enough like panel bond, seam sealer between them so that it doesn't create a gap for rust. Seems like the best approach, especially on that side where it's very perforated and they don't make replacement panels. So why would I cut and piece and all that, seam weld and all that stuff? It just doesn't, doesn't seem like you gain anything. So I'm gonna make patch panels that lay on top of that, maybe inside the grooves and stuff, you know, seam sealer in between, tack weld it into place, seam sealer, so that at least when you're in the car, it doesn't, when you're driving this on the road, it's sealed from the outside and the carpet's not getting wet from underneath. Which this car, these holes are from water standing in here and then rotting away the floor. So that's what we're going to do here. So the next step is now to cut a template out of cardboard for that hole. We're going to start with this one. Okay, now that I've got my cardboard sort of template cut out, and this is rough, it's a rough cut, but it's always a little bit bigger because I want to make sure I have enough material when I start cutting it into the metal. And I'm looking for like extra seams to maybe grind and weld to once the panel's hammered into place. And then maybe a round edge. And I cut the corner off here because there's just no reason to go all the way up there. As I was saying, when the compressor kicked on, there's no reason to go all the way up into here. It's just more surface you gotta weld. So I just want to find places that I can weld to and maybe do some plug welds along the way. But this area is I'm going everywhere you see a hole or any gap, I'm going to put seam sealer in here and then press it into place and then spot weld it, plug weld it even. That way it creates, you know, no real area for moisture underneath to get up into between these two panels, because to be honest with you, that's gonna just temporarily solve this problem. It's just gonna come back. So I want to use thick enough metal that looks galvanized. I gotta figure out whether it is or isn't, and then what I gotta do to it if it is, or maybe find a different piece of metal for this side. The other side has rust in this spot on that side, as well as this area, and really the floor on the driver's side, this side doesn't appear to have any holes in it that I can find, but on that side there was a lot more moisture that sat in that carpet and just ate away the floor. Now, could I put some seam sealer on there and just be done with it? Yeah, probably could, or just some sound deadener, and then seal it from the other side. I don't know. This is a budget-minded project, and since I have some of this material from, I go to the scrap yard a lot, metal yard, and I buy whatever pieces I can. Really cheap, it's nice, it's a great resource for metal. When you're working on a project and there are no patch panels, it's really what's going to make the rust stay away the longest and what works the best. And I'm going to try this out because I've never done this before by making a sandwich like panel like that, and we'll see how it goes. It's not the best way, but it's my way. So we'll give it a shot and see what happens. So now that I've got the template cut out for the most part, I'm going to transfer it to the metal. Hopefully this piece is big enough. Yeah, it's just about the same size. And we'll cut it out. We'll trace it out with Sharpie, and then I'll use a death wheel to cut that. And then we'll start sort of using the shape of the car as sort of a buck. Bending it into place, tweaking it, whatever. And then once it's where I want it, then I can just come in with the old zip-zap machine over there and whatever I feel like it, and then move on to the next hole, because I'm already really sick of looking at this progress. I've been doing a lot of other projects, and sometimes you come back into it and it's hard to get rolling again because your momentum's stalled. So when you have a bunch of different projects, it's fun when you're, my goal is to make YouTube videos where the progress moves along and you get to see a finished product on each one of these series. But the reality is sometimes right now, especially with me being out of work, I pre-purchased a lot of the materials for some of these projects that you're going to see several years in advance, kind of knowing that this layoff in the future might happen, and it did. So sometimes you got to stall out and you got to move to something else, but I really don't like that, because when I follow other people, I like to see the project finished. So I'm trying to finish this one, and especially for the folks and friends that I've made on SN95 forums, I'd like to be able to take this car to a meet and meet some of those guys, and say, hey, this is what I did when, and I shared it on the forum, and meet some folks. So I'd really like to drive this car and take it to a Mustang show this spring. And right now, you can't drive it anywhere, but at least the dashboard looks pretty. So, all right, so I'm going to trace that out with the Sharpie and then cut it, and then we'll bring you back in while we're fitting it and see how that goes. And a little more work on the car that I'm trying to film in some of these videos so that you can see what I'm doing, because sometimes you just see updates, and it's okay, I guess. Okay, so now that there's my template cardboard traced onto the metal. Now I'm just going to death wheel that, and basically this is just like your typical, I got this from Walmart, I think, just construction paper, and it's big sheets of it. You could probably use pizza boxes, or I really used to, when I used to drink a lot of soda, I used to like to use the 12 pack cardboard, but I don't have a lot of that anymore, and I've used it all up, so I've had to buy some. But really, there's anything that you can sort of shape really works out pretty good. So now we're going to cut this out. That's the hole. That's our hole that we're going to cover and sandwich in there. And I think this is 18 gauge, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm trying to go a little like floor gauge. I think that's usually for the newer cars. But it's going to be sandwiched together, and it's going to be plug welded, so it's going to be super strong. And if this is in fact galvanized, I have to figure out the poisonous gases that will be released when I weld it. So I got to figure out how to take care of it so that we can get it in there without any injury. Okay, here we go. I actually found my air nibbler. I forgot that I bought one from the old Hobo Freight. So that worked out. Used the air nibbler. Now I'm using the the floor area here as a buck. I'm bending it in. Now, one would ask themselves, why don't you just, and I might, so let me get there and I'll explain it. Say, hey, why don't you just go on ahead and start zip-zapping it in and then hammer it into place? Well, I've done that. I've done that too. So, and I might, but right now I'm just trying to get it to where I feel like it's going to sit in there. It's not going to twist. And I feel like I got to shave this a little more off of that edge, because it's not getting in as far as I'd like it to go in there. And you can see it scratching. So then I'll hammer this into place, and now we have a nice strong 18 gauge patch for that ridiculous hideousness. And once I get a couple of tech screws in it to hold it in place, then I can zip zap a couple spots and then start grinding the way some of the KBS coat, because to be honest with you, that is thick stuff, and it might burn a little. It's not impervious, so let me make this very clear. It's not impervious to the heat, so that's not why I do that. I just do it because wherever it'll hold up from after the welding, I've got this extra super strong paint that is like it's a mechanical bond to the metal, to the treated surface. The three-step process makes a mechanical bond. It's not a chemical bond. That's different than like your top coats and your paints. They all have like a chemical adhesion property where each one chemically bonds into the next layer, like into the sealer and then to the primer, and then the primer, the sealer, and then your base coat and your clear coats are different than these types of paints. They're considered a mechanical bond where it's locks onto the surface below of it, mechanically speaking, and there's some science there that I don't know, so you'll have to go zip zap and look it up and figure it out for yourself. But I've done that a little bit, and I've talked to them on the phone, and there's information on their website you can look up, so that's the answer to that. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to get this to fit a little bit better in here. This is the only area, and this had seam sealer in here, but I ground all this out. It was just no longer doing its job, and you can see I didn't grind the paint off of here. They put the sound deadening on before they paint the car, so it's just primered in there. So we're gonna paint all that once all this is welded back in with another coat of something strong, maybe even a bed liner, maybe something like that, you know, or a truck liner or something, because, you know, Ford doesn't do that for cost reasons, but it doesn't mean you can't. It doesn't make it non-good. So we're going to do that. All right, so now I'm going to trim this up, get that to fit, and then I'll lay the seam sealer down, and I'll bring you in there for that, and then we'll make some progress on that corner. Okay, just a quick check on how things are going. I'm fitting the panel in. I'll take it out, take it back over to the anvil, continue shaping it. I've got this shape here that I'm trying to recreate a little bit. I'll probably buzz a self-tapper in there as I start welding. I just want to cover up all these and this gap, and I want to weld to this, so this is no longer going to be seam sealed. It'll be welded. It'll be seam sealed underneath, but on the outside it'll be welded in. This covers a lot of that. That's the good part. The bad part is I got to do a lot more. I think I got to just do a lot more shaping than I'd like, because it's thicker steel than I anticipated, so it's taking a while longer to shape. But that's okay, because she needs what she needs. An old farmer said that once. I thought that was pretty funny. All right, so that's where we are now. It's not pretty, it's not fun, it's not going very smoothly, but it's going. So I'll bring you back in when I've got a couple of updates to show. Okay, now I'm on to like drilling the hole for this. And this is the plug that has to pass through that hole. Explain to me why that hole has to be like 2.5 inches in diameter when a little grommet like that fits on it, and you can just jam some silicone in it. So I'm going to drill a smaller hole so that this will pass through and plug into the harness, but not be what I would like to consider probably the weak point of this floor to begin with. So I'm going to put a smaller hole in it and just be done with it. So I've got this size that I have to drill a hole in our floor pan. I've started it here, and then I'll pass that through there. As long as the plug fits through and the grommet fits in it, then I'll silicone that. I should say silicone, I'll seam seal it really. Maybe I'll silicone, who knows, whatever. And then that way it's nice and tight instead of that giant 2-inch hole, which seems to be obnoxiously excessive for a small plug. So still shaping this, still getting it to where this is for the seat belt relief, and then we'll start zip zapping it in. Almost there, almost there. Just a little more shaping. Sometimes making your piece, if you spend the time now, once you start welding it in, you'll have a lot better time getting it to completion than if you just sort of get it close and then hammer it in. I've done both, so I've learned my lesson. I think this is the best approach. So we're gonna keep forging ahead, get this hole drilled out, and then get it ready to start tacking it in. Okay, let me get you in here and take a look at this patch. Here's where I am. I ended up cutting the hole out the size of the plug, which I wasn't really super excited about, because I looked and I need new sensors for this car, and I thought I don't want to depin the connector and have to repin it and do all that rigmarole with a smaller grommet, even though it makes more sense to me. That thing is just such a behemoth. I'm going to show you. I've got to buy new sensors, so I had to make this hole, and I made it a little bit smaller so it fits super tight. But the panel is now, I think it's ready to start drilling some holes so that I could do a few plugs. It's really in there and it's shaped the way I want it. And now I just want to get the opening. I want to drill a couple holes here so that I can drill some plug holes so that I can plug weld it here and here. I like to work my way when it's a panel, and if you're going to have multiple places, I like to work my way out, because the metal will heat up, and if it stretches and it goes anywhere, it has a place to escape in every direction. And so that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to weld along the middle here, and then when I get up into here, a couple of tacks on either side, and then hammer this down into place, and then weld along the trunk, the wheel well metal there, so that I don't have a seam. And then I'm gonna, before I start welding though, I'm going to pack it with that stuff, Dynatron. You can get this at like your Advanced AutoZone, O'Reilly Mart. They sell this stuff. Hopefully it's still good, because it was out in my shed and it might have hardened on me, and then I'd be out of luck and have to go to the store again, which I just came back from, which is super awesome. It's always efficient. So yeah, so the panel is there. I think I've got everything covered that I want to cover on this side. Then I'll do the same over there. And then I'll do that one. And then we'll seal it, top and bottom, underneath the car, and then in here. Once that's done, I guess we'll start tearing the car apart. The car needs some attention to the suspension, so I'm going to turn to the SN95 experts and say, hey, makes a lot of noise when you hit bumps and it's all squeaky and stuff. What do you think that could be, and what should I replace? Because the car, when I drove it, it isn't exactly, it doesn't handle all, it handles like a wet sponge. I don't like it. It was a little more bouncy than I expected, although I still love these cars. They're still awesome. But I want it to handle a little nicer, but not be firm, like, hey, I'm taking it to track day. No, I want it to be just between that somewhere. So I'll be hitting up the forums for that, and it's got a bunch of guys there that I really met so far that I really enjoy interacting with, so we'll see what they say. So now we'll get this done. We'll get that side done. We'll get that done, like we just said, and on to sealing it up and then working on the outside of the body, because I know it looks good on camera because I've watched the videos as I edit them. When you look at this, you go, man, that car doesn't need a paint job, it needs a buff job. No, I promise you, I don't know if you can actually see this, but that is, whoever painted that, painted right over I don't know, like, it's like when you paint a house and you scrape it and there's paint underneath and then you paint over it and you can see where the old paint was. That's what's on this car all over the place. Like this. Hey. Yeah, that's not good. It's terrible. So we're gonna address that. Plus there's this. Oh, damage. There's this. Filler. There's this weird pinch. And then there's all of that seam sealer that's been flaking off. See? Look at that. That's the seam sealer. And that's exposed edge, and if you can't just leave that alone, so we're gonna have to paint it. Decision made. All right, so we're gonna get back into it. And nobody said this channel wasn't corny. And then we'll get back into this for now. All right, I'll bring you guys back in when I've got some of that zip-zapped in. Okay, I think I've got this site done. So one of the things that I had to do is I had to patch the fender well because it was actually so perforated that anytime I tried to lay a bead anywhere near this fender well in this area, it's just blowing holes through there. So I had to lay a patch over it and then close it up, and then on the other side I'll go in and do some cleanup and grinding it flat so that it doesn't create pockets for rust. But I formed this to the shape of, and what I use really is what's underneath is basically as you're heating it up, and you can kind of hammer on it, and it sort of makes it like I said, like a buck for the shape. So that is, and I ended up going with this hole because I did some research, and if you replace the ABS wheel sensor, it comes with this gigantic, stupid plug. So I decided to cave and just go ahead and do that, so that at the very least you can change parts out and it's not weird or anything. So other than a little bit of the weld being a little bit, you know, kind of funky, it is galvanized steel. I did have to figure out that you got to grind off the coating so you don't kill yourself with the poisonous gas. And the dissimilar metals created a challenge with the weld. So some of it looks piled up, and then I had to grind it back and then heat up the welder and then blow holes in it. So the only thing that I'll say is if you're doing this, if at all possible, try to match the gauge of steel so that you can set your welder accordingly, because what I did was thicker metal, thinner metal, hole. And it was just not fun. And I've done that 1,000 times and I really hate it. It's just not a fun ordeal. So I did what I said before. I tacked it in here and then here and here. Center tacked, and then I went around and got it in, and I did along the top so that, and I'm going to seam seal all this anyway on top of it because there's still some seam seal that's going there. And then in the corner, I always get carried away. Now, instead of like spotting it here and there, thinking that that's good enough and that's going to be fine, or plug welding, and I always get crazy and I seam weld everything because I don't know, I'm just because I like wasting wire, I guess. So that's really, really in there. And underneath, if you remember, we puttied the whole area with the seam sealer itself, basically like laying a ceramic tile in a kitchen or something, or in a house. I basically sandwiched that in there so that there's no air. There's no real place for moisture to collect and just create havoc in there. It's just going to be all sandwiched up real nice. So now it's on to that. So, well, there's still holes. There's holes, I mean, in the tunnel. There's just, you could seam seal it, but it's, you know, again, I don't know why. Just make a patch, trace it out, and weld it. Because in the long run, you'll have peace of mind knowing that your floor does not have open holes to the drive shaft tunnel, you know, where it's going to be spinning around and eventually just blowing water up in there. So we're going to go ahead and seal that. And then underneath, when I get under there, I'm going to pack it with tar so that it never has an opportunity to spread. And then we get that one, and then that one, and then the inside is done. And we can move to body work, because this car is just absolutely, the paint's just smoked. Like, here's some of the original paint. Anybody who knows like GMs and Fords, and maybe Chryslers, I don't know that much, but you get to a certain age and the paint just delaminates from the primer underneath. It's crazy. I got an F197 F150 where the whole door is just delaminating, kind of like this. It looks like this, and it's just like the more it's exposed to moisture, water gets down in there. I mean, look at that. That's factory primer. And it's just blowing right off this door. And it's even been repainted. So it's still like, primer, I hate you. I'm coming off. Get off me. And just like, that's just insane. So, and then when I bought it, it wasn't there. Matter of fact, I think it started off as just a little chip, and then it just went, and then you see where it's settled for a while on this shape, and then it got, re-energized and said, hey, let's continue destroying it, and boom, there you go. So there's that. Now, the nice thing about blowing holes inside your fender well is that when you have a light on the inside and you don't realize it at first, you say, hey, why is there light inside my wheel well? That's not normal. So that's how I figured that out. Now, just real quick, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make this in a couple of pieces because this side's got a hole in a really weird place and a couple here, and then there's a lot of solid metal. So I'm going to make this shape, weld that one in. First I'm going to place it in, and this time I'm going to grind all around it because it was a challenge. It's just difficult to grind it afterwards. I'm going to make this piece, and then I'm going to make this piece. And I'm not going to go all the way up in here, even though this is really, it was rusting. There's no holes in it right now, and I'd rather not blow any holes in there. But I would like to weld along where I can see a solid ridge of metal, like that. And then up against this, maybe go all the way around that like I did before so that the seatbelt thing doesn't sit wonky. And this will be done. And I got that hole, and so that's where I am. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for a shape maybe out of this old floor pan that I could cut in there so I don't have to do so much metal shaping and figure out a way to just make it fit. So the next is I'll cut my piece out of here, and then I'll bring you guys back in once I get that cut, and we're going to start test fitting. Okay, here's a little bit of an update. I cut the panel out like I showed you from that other scrap of the Torino floor. I got it in here, and then I started my way around here. Missed a few spots, don't worry about that. Zip zapped it in here a little bit, and then I start shaping it to the floor. As I get it tacked into place, you can sort of hammer it into place to make your own kind of patch panel. Remember, these things aren't available, so this is just what I have to do, is cut out a piece of metal. And it was like this. It was like a lazy 45, maybe 50-degree angle, and started to shape it. And normally I like to make round corners, and there's a reason for that, and I may have said it in other videos, maybe not. But if you're ever patching something on a flat panel, and like say a quarter panel or something, you're patching a rust hole, you're going to find that a round patch is better than a square patch because it doesn't have all that heat isolated into four corners. So I tend to like to round my corners. Whether or not that's true, I've heard it from other people, so I tend to subscribe to that theory. So for now, this one under here is also seam sealers packed under there. So it's packed under there. The holes that were in there are underneath. We'll weld this together. Then we'll put this panel in. And then, believe it or not, this side's done. And then it's just this Swiss cheesery of nonsense. That's gonna suck because it's just everywhere, and there is no easy way to do it when it's like that. It's so thin that everywhere you try to think you're gonna have it sealed up, it's gonna, and there's just little holes everywhere. The more you look, the worse it gets. There's one there, there's one there. It's like, do I just cover it with seams? Okay. there and there. It's just absolute Swiss cheese because water laid in here and the carpet just soaked and stayed wet, and so it rotted. And if I could just cut this whole thing out and replace this whole panel just like from there, that would probably just be so much easier, but it's not available. And it looks better than it is, depending on the camera. Then I promise you, and it's strong, it's holding me just fine, but this is gonna suck. So back to that, then I'll get that one, cut the hole out like I did over there. This seat area will be finished, and I'll have just this to contend with. The car doesn't have any rust on the outside. Oddly enough, it's just convertible issues that we're dealing with. And then we'll seam seal all of the gaps where we ground it out. Make sure it's nice and clean. Give it a zip zap of some paint and call it done. Put down some sound deadening. Scrub this a little bit because it's filthy, and then this is done. We'll get to the body work. All right, well, that's where we are now with that patch. I'll bring you in when I'm halfway through this. All right, let's get a final look at the back seat welding that I did and patch panel, because I'm going to call that done for now, and we're going to move on to the body work on the next episode. So let's wrap up what we got done. Have a look. Come on in here. So the patch panels were made. I KBS coated them, and then I painted them like a Rust-Oleum, you know, kind of gutter paint or whatever they call it. And then I seam sealed the welds because I wanted the paint to get down into the nooks and crannies on the welds. I didn't want them to be completely bare. And then I seam sealed the rest of it. So this was replaced. A little piece in here was welded in because I was blowing holes into the wheel well, which was super fun. I was enjoying that a lot. And then over there, it was a different metal. He used a different piece. Basically, you can see wherever the seam sealer is, it basically outlined it with seam sealer, but that was the panel, and then the other little rectangle there was a panel, and there was a little panel right here because there was a weird hole right there. Now once I get done with the car, I'll get, and we get into working on the suspension because it's making a lot of weird noises and squeaks and rattles and whatnot. We'll be under the car, so that'll be time to undercoat all of this. And if you recall, I went ahead and cut the regular size hole, even though it seems absurdly, obnoxiously big, because I'm replacing the and those holes are for the ABS wheel sensors to come through. So I figured it was let's just make it so you can replace it with a factory item. And I've got 2 new ones, so they're going to pop in there. Then we'll seal that up, and then that should be good to go. And then I will come in once I get to the point where I'm going to start painting this car. I'll just mix up a little bit of paint or another coat of white of some other kind, you know, and just recoat this because it looks like that. And I'm going to lay down sound deadening material in here, and then this will be done. So now that this is done, this was the only rust, these 2 spots. So you can see we're back to what I would consider a sealed interior of the car, which is good. Now it's on to the body work, and we'll do that, and we'll get started on that on the next episode. So if you're following along on the build, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And thanks to the SN95 forums community where they're answering a lot of my questions, and I'm sharing this video on that forum in a hyperlink. So if you want to hop over there and check out some of the chat and some of the comments the guys are making for me, there's a thread over there. And as always, you know, shoot me one of these if it helps. Really, I guess it helps out. I don't know. I'm not really good at YouTubes. But I just want to say thanks again for watching. I appreciate all the new subscribers that have jumped in the last few weeks. And I'll see you on the next one.